Hello and welcome to In Search of Purpose with Sal Hanvey. Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Sal Hanvey and I am in search of purpose this week with Linley Hamilton. Hello, Linley.
Hello, Sal. This is very nice. This is my first one of these for a while, so I'm at your disposal. Whatever you want to know or ask or chat about, I'm your man.
Great. Well, loads. I mean, you're the sort of person that you could talk to all day long. We could be here for hours and hours on end, but we'll have to, I suppose, cut it off at some point. But there are plenty of things I want to talk to you about. One, firstly, being what's your main lockdown tip at the minute? How are you coping?
Oh, well, I'm lucky where I'm located. I'm out in the country, so I'm able to get out for my exercises, and I think that's the really big thing, is to make sure you can, if you can get out of your space. I think there's two ways to do it. One is to get your head out of the space by not being an observer of television or radio or the stuff you haven't tidied away. Get your head out of the space by actually being creative, whether it's a work thing, whether it's a reading thing, whether it's setting yourself a target for something that you haven't done that you want to do, something even just learning how to cook or bake, or it's something that's just a wee bit out of the ordinary, planting vegetables, watering flowers, becoming a gardener, things that are just going to lift your head, and then just get out and get exercise, But I mean, I'm still working, it's just I'm working from home instead of traveling, so that keeps me busy anyway,
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure lots of people will be tuning in when they see Linley Hamilton as the title of my podcast, In Search of Purpose, that week. But for those who have maybe heard of you but don't really know what you do, or for people who are coming to see you for the first time here in this podcast, just give a brief outline of what it is that you actually do.
Well, now I'm a musician. I've been a musician for 30 years, full time. Well, I've been a professional musician for 30 years. In that time, mostly it was touring and recording and playing locally. I was involved with bands like The Commitments, Paul Brady, Morrison and Paul Brady, that kind of thing. So some stuff was away, and that gives you a profile. I ended up doing a lot of recording. I'm a trumpet player by career or by profession. So it drives up the center of absolutely everything. I've been on around about 130 records, and I've got 5 or 6 albums of my own, because I'm an artist now. I'm a jazz musician, so I've got 5 or 6 jazz albums.
Only 130.
Well, you see, you're a session player. See, it's not like drums or bass or piano, where you're probably more you're part of a group in a very, very big way, rehearsing, writing, gigging, and things like that. You're a trumpet player, you're brought in to do somebody's record, and it could be somebody you haven't worked with before. In fact, you might never get to meet them. They want brass, they want you to write the parts. You drive to somewhere in Oma, and you might do 2 albums while you're there for the day. So you end up being on stuff, possibly doing the launch album, possibly not, possibly just hearing it played in the radio and thinking, oh yeah, I remember writing that brass part. So that kind of session player thing, you can end up being an awful lot of stuff. There's people who are more prolific than me. People like Nicky Scott, the bass player from here, would probably be in a situation where he'd be doing maybe 15 or 20 records a year, So
Wow.
And you just end up being in that situation. You can read fast, you can write your own parts, you can play your own parts, and you're pretty good at going into the studio and getting it nailed quite quickly, because the big expense is to hire the studio. The studio can be up to £700 or £800 a day, and if you're paying 4 or 5 musicians as well to be there, it can be about 12 or 1500 quid a day just to be recording. So you can't be saying, I want to have a go at that again, I think I split that note. You got to get it in 2 or 3 takes, so you're out, So somebody's in the pocket.
Yeah, so you got to get it done. And a guy that we both know, Paddy Anderson, was asking for you, a great flamenco guitar player.
Yes,
and I had him on one of my podcasts there a while back, and he was saying that he's actually going to work with, he's in Los Dramaticos with Steve and Victor. Well, apparently him and Victor are going to do a live stream on Zoom, separately but yet remotely and together, if you understand me. Yeah. So they're going to join for the purpose of a gig, but on 2 different screens. So instead of actually playing together in a room, which obviously is another thing, they're playing together in separate rooms. Is this something that you would consider, considering that you're not going to just play trumpet to the audience for an hour and a half, although you might? Have you considered doing something like that?
the longer this goes on, I'm going to have to do it because obviously, I mean, I'm enjoying lockdown because I'm working from home. I'm doing a radio show from home. I'm teaching. I'm a university lecturer. I'm doing that teaching from home as well. And I'm practicing an awful lot, you know, but practicing is one thing and sort of communicating with other players is another. I've been asked to do some records again because basically there's an interface set up with a Mac where you can actually receive an MP3, open a track, play your part, send it back, and somebody can mix it. So I think that's going to be happening quite a bit. But in terms of gigging, I'm not sure that I'll be able to get a high enough quality sound when I'm playing on top of what somebody else is playing for me to enjoy playing, whether anybody's going to be watching it or not. But I'm going to have to think of something eventually, because it's the first break I've had in gigging for 30 years, and I've always been a 4 or 5 gig a week guy, and it's really quite remarkable now just how life has changed.
I know, but it also shows just how much can be done online. Not necessarily a really good quality high sound gig, but when it comes to the amount of things that can be done, you know, like you're lecturing. So explain to me a bit about what sort of stuff that you lecture in, Linley.
Well, it's a degree in music. It's a general degree, so there's performance is obviously my area of expertise. So looking at performance, you know, that would be breaking down the performance technical structures into things that can be isolated and can be fixed one by one and then brought together again. So, for example, articulation, how you'd strike it, whether you're a guitarist or whether you're a trumpet player or whatever, even if you're a singer, intonation, tuning, improving dynamic capacity, teaching or guiding people how to use dynamics across one line so that there's a narrative, performance narrative within a line as well as performance narrative within a piece or a whole performance of pieces. So there's a whole stack of different things, you know, that can be fixed even in terms of harmony. So teaching that in terms of performance, jazz history and sort of musicology elements of jazz harmony as well. And then I supervise an awful lot of masters, and supervising Scott Flanagan's PhD.
I'm sure that's going well.
Yeah, well, he's based like he terrifies me whenever I know I've got a meeting coming up with him, because I say, I just sort of tease out, and what have you been doing again? Oh, right, okay. And then I quickly slam the phone down, write it all down, and research for 10 hours. So they just annihilate me, you know. So doing that and a lot of final year projects. And then I'm the placement officer for the music department. So I create employability opportunities for final years and try and get them to use the placement to find out their own personal strengths and weaknesses, to find out how their past experiences, even if it's not as a musician, even if it's working in a pub or working in a bar and pulling pints and picking up the till, or working in a coffee shop on Saturday. It's the discipline, it's those kind of things that they might think, well, that's no good to me if I can have a career in music. And I'm saying, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So let's find out what makes you the person. Let's find out what skills you have transferred to get to this part. Let's see what you're going to learn in the placement for the next 3 months related to what you've done, so that then you've got your transferable skills out, and therefore you become an employability asset, whether it's as a self-employed person, which most musicians would be, or whether you're being employed by somebody else as a self-employed musician, or if you're being a teacher. Because half the big thing about being a teacher is flexibility, is trying to focus, if you have a class of 30, on how you can isolate each member of that class, because their learning objectives are going to be totally different. Their career is going to be totally different. So you've got to try and isolate them, find out what makes them tick, and generate some aspect of what you're teaching to developing them as an individual, so that they actually belong to the class rather than sitting as an observer. Not a big fan of being an observer, ever. I don't like watching other people live, and I'd much rather do it myself. And I think the world's an awful lot healthier whenever people are actually getting off their ass and generating something, even if it's just a friendship, you know, even if it's just a bed of roses or wildflowers, you know, it's generating something. It's making it happen. It's not just watching it happen. What's the fun in that?
Well, there isn't, and I think that, you know, as much as you're looking to see their assets, they're more than likely looking at you and thinking that you're a great asset to them and helping them visualize that and trying to ascertain it, which is fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you the edge I have, which I didn't know I had, but it was pointed out to me, and I'm grateful it was pointed out. I didn't do music at school, so I was a civil engineer.
Yes, that's right.
I studied as a civil engineer. I didn't study music, and but I played it from a very young age, from 9 or 10. Played in the brass band, Ballyduff Silver Band. Played in a big 10-piece swing orchestra and a small 5-piece jazz orchestra from I was 14. The Bob Dixon Jazz Band, and it was just something I did an awful lot of, and I was quite good at. But it never occurred to me I'd ever have a career in it or whatever. And it wasn't really until I'd actually been an engineer for about 3 or 4 years. I'd worked in Strabane and the Floodwall and things, and I got a chance to do some highly paid work with the Commitments at the very start of that movie. And that was the only time at that stage that I actually thought, I wonder, is it possible? And then I thought, well, I don't have any qualifications.
How did you get that gig, Linley?
How did I get the gig? Well, basically how I got the gig is I was part of a jazz orchestra called the Irish Youth Jazz Orchestra, and people like Richie Buckley, Michael Buckley, Brendan Doyle, Eamon Keane, a whole lot of the guys who have become Dermot Harlan, the late great Dermot Harlan from here, a whole lot of guys who have become part of the Irish professional jazz scene started off in this youth jazz orchestra. Massive instruction, a guy called Bobby Lamb from Cork, who flew in from England to take the band every weekend. Remarkable tutor. And most of us went on to have professional careers. But then the best players of the age group were kind of playing together. So as it happens to be, whenever you book people, you're normally booking your friends or people you know, or you know what they can do. And most jazz musicians can read really well, especially if they're playing in a big band. So the reading is good. The range has to be good because the notes are written quite high up. So they've got to have that, and they can solo, which is why they're in the jazz band. So if you can do those things, then you're going to be pretty good in a rock and pop and sort of wedding band even setup, you know, where you're going to play lines. You might even be able to write your own if there aren't any. You're able to play a solo if somebody points to you, you know. So it came out of that. And it was a guy actually called Michael Buckley originally gave me the gig. Michael Buckley, sax player, flute player. A lot of people would know. He's been around. He's from Glenn Hansard's band now. He's been around for many years. Michael and I would have known each other from a very young age. Whenever he was maybe even only 13 or 14, he was playing the Youth Jazz Orchestra. Amazing musician at that stage and still now. And I remember there was some situation in Belfast at the time where I'd booked Michael to do one of my very early jazz gigs where I'd put a set together and I was going to bring him up to show him off, and we were going to play some stuff. We played in Dublin together, and something had happened. I can't remember whether it was a shooting or a bombing or something, and he chickened out. And I said, oh man, you know, I have people coming to this gig and I have posters up. It was only in my early 20s, you know, and he chickened out. And I thought, this is a disaster. And I remember he rang me 2 months later, and this is pre-mobiles, I think, if I remember, sorry to give my age away, pre-mobile phones and pre-everything, actually, pre-internet, pre-everything. And I remember him ringing me to the landline, obviously, and saying, do you fancy a gig on the 17th of March? And I was still kind of smarting a bit, you know. 17th of March, I said, I don't think so. I said, it's my birthday.
That's right.
My birthday on St. Patrick's Day. And he said, that's a pity. I said, why? He says, it's the St. Patrick's Day ball in New York with the Commitments.
Okay.
And, okay, I'll do it. So I haven't been able to repay him back for that one, but that started it all off. And then the years later, then, you know, I went and did a master's in performance in Dublin, and then did a PhD, and I'm now a doctor of jazz, and I see the world in a very different way than I did then. I see music in a totally different way, and I see the possibilities of this idea of musicians being a satellite for good. You know, so they're a satellite. They bump into other people. Every time they bump into them, an opportunity is created. In many ways, like us, you know, from working together, from becoming friends after working together. This Zoom exercise, somebody might spot this and think this is an interesting approach. you can't, if you're a musician, not have an impact on other people. Every time you meet somebody, you're having an impact, whether it's the way you play, whether it's you being generous and supportive about how they're playing, whether it's creating an opportunity for them to rehearse, whether it's telling them what record has floated your boat in recent times. You're always going to have a positive impact on them, whether it's even these days where you can share something they've put up on social media or Facebook, or make a recommendation on your page to recommend them so that other people can see. And it's a wonderful thing. So why not just be good, and why not just be nice, and why not just be positive and create these opportunities? And if you can plant that seed in people young enough, it's going to be good for everybody.
I'd say so. But you didn't start playing with manuscript until you were older, isn't that right?
Well, I could read, and I played in the jazz orchestra, but most of the gigs that I did were just jazz gigs. So therefore, there been actually written parts or anything like that. So I wasn't like I was doing the pit orchestra, the pantomime or anything like that. I've never done that kind of thing. But I was playing in Soul Truth, which was Foy Vance's original band. It was a 7-piece band. So again, worked out the parts for that, did that gig, doing quite a lot of jazz band gigs, knew the material, played that. So no, there was no reading required. And it's always a skill that I've felt whenever I've walked into a big band and I've looked at who's in the big band. And I see, especially most of the big bands I play with are in the south of Ireland or in the UK. And I look at the pedigree of the players and I think, why am I here? You know, it must be because I want me to take a few solos, you know, but I've worked really hard. What I've had to do as I've got older in the last 15 years is every time I do something new, I think of it like a project. So I kind of block it off and I think, okay, well, that project's going to happen in 10 weeks. So I'm going to get the music early. I'm going to have it so that 8 weeks before that project starts, I have all the parts off. And then I'm going to, you know, have a look and see if there's any really complicated chord changes in the solos that I have to do. And I'm going to write out patterns and practice those patterns and see if I can actually spontaneously create something on the day as a result of internalizing something in my memory banks for how to play. I guess we would call it, you know, muscle memory. Oh, yeah. Although I think that's a dangerous term because I don't think it is muscle memory. I think it's more to do with how the neurons in the brain connect. I think whenever you hurt your head, people say my head hurts. You know, I think whenever you hurt your head through practice by doing something obscenely difficult that you really don't want to get involved with, but you know it's good for you, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I think whenever you do that, what you're doing is there's a one neuron somewhere there and one somewhere there, and they're saying, "Hi, I never saw you before," and they create this connection, and they've set that line up, and they're now active. You know, if you use them again, they're going to be waving at each other and saying, "Use me, hi friend," and you build that capacity of your head to engage with things that you find very difficult at one time, that you can spontaneously engage with it because the memories of practicing it, the ways you've dissected it and brought it down into something that needs to be fixed and then brought it back into the rest of the music.
Do you not think that whenever you're a lot younger, I remember lyrics like that, never needed to write anything down, never needed to look at any lyrics, always had everything in the head. And as I got older, I've noticed that the new ones don't go in the same way that the old ones went in so easily. Do you know what I mean? Do you ever hear about that sort of thing?
And it's exactly the same as playing as well. But what I would say to you, and it's only a theory on my end, I think whenever you're younger, there's quite a lot of space in there.
Yeah, that's true.
You haven't actually held all those life experiences in there, and all the new learning situations that we have get stored somewhere. There's some kind of filing system that operates in your brain, you know, and I'm pretty full, you know, it's pretty full up there, although I'm still engaging with the process now. It's just sometimes you have to ask the brain to go to the 5th drawer down to pull that over so that you can actually be ready to do it before the gig, which is why, you know, these days, yes, I have to go and think I'm playing with Scott Flanagan tonight or Steve Davis, whatever. I better have a look at Recording Me. I better have a look at those again. Those are a bit, so maybe have a look at them in the afternoon, pull that drawer open to the front, and then you're kind of more ready to go. But it's still in there, you know. You just have to
search for it. Every time we meet, we're on the phone, we're playing music. you know, we always have this conversation that I feel like I do absolutely nothing in comparison to you. And then when I speak to everybody else, they feel like they're doing nothing in comparison to me. And I just feel like, you know, you're always on the go. You're so multifaceted. You're doing so many different things at any one time. And that would lead me on to what I want to talk about, which is your jazz world on BBC Radio Ulster as broadcaster. Explain the sort of music that's on that and what sort of show it is and when it's on, Linley.
Well, it's a Saturday night, BBC Radio Ulster, 9 p.m. It's a jazz show for contemporary jazz mostly. So I would say 80% of all the music, 85% of all the music of it has probably been recorded since the late 70s. Half of the show would be recorded in the last 5 years. It's current. I mean, it's kind of funny. The way people think differently about presenting live music or jazz recorded music these days is that if you have an opportunity to see an artist, if you have an opportunity to see a YouTube of their concert, if you have an opportunity to engage with them on social media, I mean, people like, for example, Cassandra Wilson, most of my friends are friends with her on social media. She's answering, she's liking the fact that they did a gig in SD Bells and things like that. We're thinking, what? Booker Pratt, double Grammy winner, Cassandra Wilson, what are you doing in New York saying hi to us? You know, so the world is a much, much smaller place. And so if you're playing music, it's nice if you can play music of people that are still gigging, still communicating, that have a social web page. And then the people who are engaging with listening to the show have a chance to actually connect with the music in a very personal way. So there's that kind of focus. There's also a focus on the local players, because there are so many great records. I mean, whenever I started doing a jazz radio show in Northern Ireland, it was about 13 years ago.
Wow.
And Siobhan Pettit was the only person that I was aware of at that time who had a record who was living and actively in Northern Ireland, living in the scene. Now there are 75 albums. People like Mark McKnight, Scott Flanagan, even myself, Darren Beckett, who people might have heard of. Darren Beckett was a child prodigy from here, went to live in New York, worked with Lee Konitz, recorded with Lee Konitz, recorded with so many incredible bands. Brandon Flowers from The Killers. Well, just even talking about Darren Beckett first, you know, Darren would probably be in the top 20 in the world as a rock drummer and as a jazz drummer. So he's a different level from anything that we have here. But he's from a place called Antrim, you know, and he's now moved back to the UK, to Brighton, and he did a master's at Ulster University 2 years ago, and he's connecting all the time. He's just released an album with George Colligan Trio. So he's like an enormous fish. Yes, there's people like David Little, Mark McKnight, Scott Flanagan. There's an amazing bass player who's just moved back to Northern Ireland called Dermot McNeil. There's an incredible guitar player who's been a session player in Northern Ireland for the last 25 years, 20 years, let's say. He's not that old, in his 40s, I think. But a beast called Matt Curran, and you know, he's been in Nathan Carter's band and all that country session stuff. I mean, the guy's just phenomenal, you know, and he's just come into the jazz world here now. And of course, it's a very, very healthy scene. So part of this job is to, as a radio broadcaster, is to encourage people to listen to the great jazz greats like Randy Brecker and Cassandra Wilson and Brad Meldau and all those incredible people, and also then to show your appreciation for these people who are really making it here and making international collaborations. Quite a few of the guys have done incredible projects. Steve Davis in particular as well. We're doing incredible projects on an international scale, and they play locally. So why not feature them on the radio? Why not get people to not only hear them, join them on social media, but go and see them play live? It just makes it that thing which I was talking about earlier on, where it's not just observational. It's not just people are tuning into the radio thinking, there's Linley for an hour, some nice music. They're actually engaging with it, and they're thinking, let's get stuck in, you know what I mean? So
no, it is. It's a great show. I really enjoy it. I do miss the gigs though, Linley. I miss going on Sunday night down to see you and the Sazeracs down in Birch Jazz Bar, and you know, it's funny when you can go and do it, which I often did. Have dinner, relax for the whole evening, and watch us do your set, and that you do, you know, very well. It's not that you take it for granted. You know, that was my little sort of wind down space. You know, it was your end of your week, it was the end of my week. It was a different way in which we dealt with the end of our weeks. You would usually be rocking up from 3 other gigs that day or something. I'd be having a nice dinner and relaxing. And, you know, it's how now we can't go. So we have to wait to go. And now that it's been sort of taken away for the interim, I just cannot wait to get back to live music. And that's another thing. Jack, my partner, bought me Paul Brady and Andy Irvine gig ticket for March that is now being postponed to September. Big question mark hanging over that. And it was going to be an epic gig. I've seen their collaboration twice, and they weren't meant to be doing it since the 60s and 70s, and then they did it once years later, and then that was the end of that. Then they did it again, and then they were doing it again, and I was meant to be going, and that was cancelled. And I just hope that it happens, if not September, and then soon,
Yeah, I think for musicians, the big thing is you never really want to look back. You want to keep thinking about your next performances rather than your last ones. If you end up talking too much about your last ones, then the future's not looking maybe good for you. So I think that our responsibility really for this lockdown thing is to make sure we're ready whenever this is over. And I don't mean going back to what we did. I don't think anybody wants to go back to what they did. I think that's one thing that we've had a look at and have thought, let's draw a line over our careers to that point, and let's see how we can change moving forward. Certainly for me, I mean, I'm working very hard at the moment, putting 3 or 4 different sets together for when this is all over. I'm just recording the album for the record with Adam Nussbaum, Mark Egan, Derek O'Connor and Cian Boylan, and that's out now. Linley Hamilton for the record, but where my plan now is writing stuff for that next record, and certainly gigs that I've been doing with Scott or Kieran or different places in Bert's. I mean, let's park that old material now and let's move forward and let's keep challenging ourselves and be ready so that whenever this does come down, because I think there will be enthusiasm for the punters to actually go to the gigs.
I'd like to hear a wee bit more about for the record there, as you went flying past it, because there's that many other things I want to talk about. But how can people get a hold of that? How can people listen to that?
Well, it's all you can listen to anywhere. It's on Spotify and iTunes and Apple, and you can download it on Amazon or Apple. It's available anywhere, or you can contact me at info@linleyhamilton.com and I'll send you a copy. But it's available everywhere for the record. It's good. Basically, it's my 6th studio album, and because I have a PhD and because I'm a university lecturer, I have to submit a certain amount of research every 5-6 years in this thing called a REF cycle, where universities all gather the research that their lecturers, whatever researchers would do, and they submit it, and it's assessed and graded, and then funding is handed out to the university. So my thing is record records and playing, and I have to design the material, pick the musicians so that a certain research element can be fulfilled from the record. So once the record's complete, most people are just selling it at gigs and doing the radio, but I'm actually transcribing all the solos. I'm looking at angular activity. I don't want to bore people, but I'm looking at angular activity that is tension related, that resolves within the narrative of a line. It's heavy duty. But anyway, so I have to do these records every 2 years, roughly anyway, 18 months to 2 years, and they take that long to prepare for. They take that long to write and then to practice. The guys on this one are people I've met either through radio or through international jazz workshops that I teach on. I do quite a few of them. The drummer, Adam Nussbaum from New York, he's been around a very long time, substantial player, worked a lot with Brecker and the really, really big guys. Mark Egan, who some of you might know, is the bass player on a track by Mark Cohen called Walking in Memphis. He did lots of big commercial things like that, but he's got his own band. He works with Bill Evans, a sax player, WDR, big band. Used to be Pat Metheny's bass player in the early days. He's just a substantial musician, So those two guys are good pals with each other, and they're part of the band. We've been together now for a couple of years. We did a tour 2 years ago, and then we recorded the record and brought the guys over this year to just thankfully before the lockdown, and we did 4 sellout gigs in Ireland to launch the album. and we're writing again, planning to bring them back as soon as this is over for another tour.
Brilliant.
And then the studio and record the second album, which is again all original music, and then bring them back to tour that in 2 years. So that's a project, and I have a timeline for that project. At the moment on lockdown, I'm practicing. I haven't started to write, but I'm practicing for that project. There's a few things that I still want to work on. I've some range exercises, some tonguing exercises that I'm trying to push on, and what I'm doing at the moment is going over an awful lot of new material that I've never played before, with extremely difficult chord changes, and I'm working out how to negotiate those patterns. I'm breaking down a bar at a time and 2 or 3 bars at a time, and I'm spending a long time on it and fixing options to it. And I'm working out whether that's a resolution option or whether it's a tension option. And if it's a tension option, can it be developed? So I'm in the middle of all that stuff at the moment, and over the summer I'll get into the writing phase, and then whenever this is all over, I'm going to be what I'm telling all my students to be: ready.
Ready. Well, I love getting my dinner ready, listening to your In Transition album. It's a great album.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed them all. They've all been very different. You know, the In Transition was the last album I did as part of my PhD. Yeah. So it was the culmination. It was, if you listen closely to it, there aren't a whole lot of ideas going on at the one time. It's kind of a more refined version of what I've been doing for the 2 or 3 years before, because the research in the PhD was quite tough, and it was sort of fragmented. It was 5 months of that thing, and 6 months of that, and 3 months of that, and 7 months of that, and there were all these things that were kind of, I was focusing on at one time, and you'd hear whenever you're playing, oh yeah, well, he's just done loads of that stuff, and he's done loads of that stuff. And In Transition was more a complete album of where I'd got to at the end of the PhD, and then I followed that up with an album called Making of the Arrangements, which was with a 17-piece orchestra.
Yeah, I like the names of the titles of your albums are very good. Yeah, remember them.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it was all kind of exciting because basically the Making of the Arrangements album, all the tunes that we, more or less, some of them are original, but all of the tunes that we did were tunes that I could hear with an orchestra. And so they had to have a totally different sound and feel to what the originals did, and we had to get permission from the writers to make sure we could do it. So that was quite a complicated one, but I've always wanted to play in front of an orchestra. I've done it a few times with the Ulster Orchestra, but this was kind of more in a jazz setting with real, pretty proper jazz tunes that were kind of off the wall a bit, with an orchestra setting. And then obviously For the Record was the first one now with the new quintet, and we're going to move forward with that over the next 2 or 3 years and tour. Well, who knows? But if touring happens,
who knows? And what are you listening to at the minute?
What am I listening to? Well, I've got 2 or 3 real significant things I've been listening to. There's an album from 1982 which I used to listen to whenever I was falling in love with jazz music about 30 years ago, by a trumpet player called Red Rodney, Ira Sullivan Quintet. And it's one of those ones that comes up whenever people do this kind of thing, where they're asking me about my career, and it always comes up because if it hadn't been for that record, I would never have done music for a living. You know,
well, that's interesting. I'm sure people will want to give that a listen.
Yeah, well, it transformed my whole life really musically, you know, because it left such an imprint. You know, I played it to death. I think I put a hole in probably the vinyl, you know. 6 months whenever I got it. And there was one particular track, Speak Like a Child, written by Herbie Hancock, but played by the guys. And there was so much in it, motivic ideas that were being developed. There was incredible arrangements and this incredible bass solo by this guy called Jay Anderson. And Jay Anderson, from the photograph, was quite young. Like he would have been probably, I don't know, 30 maybe in the photograph in 1982, something like that. And I remember just saying to people, you know, about this incredible bass solo, and it was a bowed bass solo. And I remember my wife said to me, you know, you got to contact this guy and let him know. And this was now 10 years ago. The internet was up and running. I could email, and I did a Google search, and I was pretty sure that was the guy. And I sent him this email. I was in tears writing it, you know, about how it sort of impacted on my life, how it inspired me, how I just how I wanted to try and capture how I felt whenever I listened to it, whenever I played, because sometimes, people make the mistake that whenever you're playing because you want people to be impressed. But actually what you're really trying to do is you're playing to make people feel good. It's not what you play, it's how you make people feel. Because the music has that communication approach, and you can shout at somebody, or you can surround them with warmth and love. And this track made me feel like that. The solo was mind blowing. So I sent the email, and two days later, I got an email back saying, "Thank you so much for that email. I'm terribly sorry, but I have never recorded the double bass pedal. You're mistaking me with somebody else." So I thought, this is unreal. So I went online, and no, I was right. So I emailed them back, and I said, "No, here's a photograph of you, 25.
No way. Oh my God.
Actually, you playing the bass, and how dare you say that you don't like the bass solo, because this is the best bass solo I've ever heard." So we ended up talking, and 2 years ago, I was over in New York, and I ended up playing with him.
Amazing.
And it was really, it was really quite amazing. So that's one. Another record then. So that was so the album's called Sprint, Red Rodney, Ira Sullivan Quintet. The other record that I'm going to, and I went to see the guy live last year in March for my birthday in Royal Festival Hall, not this year, but 2019. And his name is Dhafer Youssef, Dhafer, Youssef, Youssef. Plays an oud, and he's a vocalist. And it's difficult to describe the energy that he creates whenever he sings. And I have no idea what he's singing. He's singing in a foreign language, and I have no idea. It could be about dishwasher tablets for all I know. But I am transformed into some other place whenever I put that record on. If you want to listen to one track, listen to Dhafer Youssef, Humankind.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah, Humankind. He has an extraordinary range and tone, color, and the relationship that he has with the clarinet player, who also has an extraordinary range and tone, color, is incredible. And it's almost like a spiritual awakening. You listen to it, and you kind of think, gosh, I've been so active in music, I've kind of done it all. You kind of think that, foolishly, some people think that. But whenever you put this on, then you realize, oh God, maybe I've missed the point of what music all is, because this is different, and you're thinking, now how can I do that? How can I attain that? Well, I probably can't, but I'm going to try.
You're going to try, and I would have every faith in your capabilities, Linley, for sure.
No, I think I'll probably fail in this one, but I'll try. I'll enjoy trying.
And what about, and I'm sure you've plenty of favourites of people that you've played with, but can you pull out an experience that sticks in your mind as being the reason that you're doing what you're doing?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been very lucky with the whole commitment, Sandra Strong, Paul Brady thing and things, all that stuff and the band stuff, and it's all been really, really nice. But it's obviously going to be the jazz musician stuff that's going to be important to me, in terms of why I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm really enjoying my current band. I don't think I've ever enjoyed a tour like the one I've just completed. I thought it was just incredible, Adam and Mark and Cian Boylan and Derek O'Connor. And I think one of the things that made it so special, and why music is so special, is because whenever you're playing, and I don't think everybody thinks this. You learn more if you're a teacher. You learn to analyze these things so you can instruct. And I think a lot of people miss this. But whenever you're playing, you're not really going to get the full benefit out of the music, if you're trying to be better than everybody else that's on the stage.
Yeah.
What you're trying to get is the best product, and that might be sometimes the book players who are better than you. But they're going to bring a different energy to you, so the whole energy is really, really good. But if you're relying on energy to create music so that feel good factor reaches the punters through the airwaves, the only way you can do that is if you have a feel good factor on it with the musicians that you're working with. It just doesn't work if you can't talk to the sax player or the bass player. It's not gonna work.
It's just, I
It's not
mean,
going to work.
ego is an
It's not
ego.
going to work.
It's bouncing around the ego to the point where it's
It's
bouncing
not
off.
going to work. So for this tour, I have my best two friends in music on the record, and as part of the tour, Derek O'Connor, who's my best buddy from Dublin on saxophone, and Cian Boylan from Dublin on piano, and we've known each other for a long time. In fact, Doc and I met on the first Commitments tour, and whenever he was only 17, and I was 25, I think, and we're still best friends, and we still talk to each other every day. That's 30 years ago, you know.
Wow.
So he's on the record. Cian Boylan's a very close friend as well, very, very close friend, and that makes it more memorable because of the whole crack that you have, and the relationship you have with the music, and the relationship we have with the musicians. And therefore, whenever you're celebrating the success of the gig being over, or whatever happens to be, or the record being over, you're not just going to your bits and listening to it and thinking, yes, I nailed it. You're actually celebrating for the other guys as well, because they nailed it, you know, and they brought that special thing. So I think for me, as I've got older, and if I'm lucky enough to get back to playing again whenever this is over and have a long career, who knows? But if that is the case, that's what I'm going to be looking for more, you know, forming relationships with the musicians so that the music has a better chance of making an impact.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important everyone's in the same room.
Well, I think so. But I mean, we're going to have to explore, I guess, other technological options over the years if this kind of thing happens again. So I think we all have to be open to technology and not see it as something that's the enemy in any way. I mean, I think there was a very interesting discussion over the years. There's a jazz critic called Stanley Crouch, who was quite vocal about Miles Davis's electric period and quite critical of it, and saw him really as selling out jazz to go down the pop thing. And there was a debate with a guy called James Matume. He was a musician at the time, and he made some really interesting points about the electric guitar, you know, coming in, and even the saxophone and things like that coming into music. And the idea was the electric keyboard. I mean, people were horrified. But they just expand the whole big circle of what the music is, and you know, they have a valid part, and they make it so much richer, and everyone can be welcomed together, you know. So I think we just got to work out how this is going to work so that we can be productive in times like this in the future.
Exactly. We're just totally having to work with what we have, but luckily you're in a nice place to enjoy that. You've moved to the country, Linley, haven't you?
Yes, moved to the country. We've had donkeys for quite a while, and we've made the journey to from Belfast to look after them, and it kind of worked, but we needed to be more based here. So we're down in Dromara now, and we have 3 donkeys that are 20 yards from the house, which is great. And we've just made a beautiful arrangement with a farmer who's our next door neighbour, who has horny ewes, and I think that means they have horns. I don't think it means anything else, but who knows? But anyway, one of the horny ewes and my wife have kind of bonded in some kind of way across the fence, and so I've made an arrangement with the farmer to rescue that horny ewe and her lamb as pets. So they're going to be moving. They're moving in at the end of July with the donkeys. Well, it's not moving in. We're going to fence off a section for them, but they're going to be moving in with the donkeys. And yeah, it's pretty idyllic. We're down near the Mourns. It's quiet. We've got a music venue beside the house, which is unfortunately quiet now. But
tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's just a space. We've both tried to create a good space with the projects that we've been involved with over the years, and we thought it would be really nice if we could fund a space that allowed other people to have good experiences, whether it be workshops, teaching, you know, lessons, master classes, doing videos for YouTube, performances, that kind of thing. And it's kind of that kind of space at the moment, and we're we've been very blessed with people who just wanted to come and experience it, and we think, you know, again, whenever this is all over, we want to be ready.
Ready again. That's the In Search of Purpose key mantra for you, is to be ready for whatever.
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm getting ready now. I'm walking. You know, I'm able to walk here, and I'm walking actually almost 3 hours a day. Believe it or not.
Amazing.
So
Are you enjoying being in the moment as much as you're enjoying being ready for the future, though?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm still kept really busy with the online teaching, and I'm really grateful that the teaching has moved online, because the big fun thing about university is that you have a real big imprint on the students, especially when they get to final year or master's students or PhD students. You're talking to them all the time on a one-to-one basis, and you're able to guide them, and you don't want to turn them into mini Linleys, or I don't want to turn them into mini Linley. I want them to be themselves. So I want to facilitate that. So you're having to think outside the box all the time to facilitate that. So having moved online to do that, it's actually even better, because you don't have to have a 1 hour meeting once a fortnight where you're doing your preparation for that meeting. They can text you at 9:15 at night and say, "You doing anything? Do you have 10 minutes so we can do a face thing there and then?" And I can probably say something that's going to keep them ticking over for 2 or 3 more days. So you really feel like you're making an impact. So yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying time for myself. I mean, I haven't had time for myself. I've been so busy over the years, just doing project after project, master's, PhD, university lecturing, radio shows, gigs, albums for somebody else, albums for myself. I haven't had a chance to actually stop and smell the coffee.
Or the roses. This is great.
Yeah, so I'm actually having time now to really appreciate the luck I've had in being able to make a career in Northern Ireland and the music I love, and the luck I've had in being able to pass it on and hopefully generate opportunities for other people. And I think I've been really, really lucky to be allowed to do that. And now I'm having time to get myself ready to be able to make a higher impact whenever this is over. And that's what I want.
Call your new album "Getting Ready."
I'll call the next one "Getting Ready," maybe. Or maybe we are ready or something. I don't really know. Maybe. Yeah, thanks for that one.
Don't worry, I'll be looking for a commission and check in the post. It's no problem. Linley, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. The podcast's In Search of Purpose. Today I was with Linley Hamilton, and good luck with everything. Stay safe, take care, and all the best. And we hope we'll see you real soon in one of the music venues near you.
Okay, you too. Thanks very much, Sal, for this opportunity to share the enthusiasm, and everybody stay lit. No matter when you're watching this, you could be watching this 10 years from now. Stay lit and get your sense of purpose and take charge, and don't observe, engage.
Engage, exactly. That's a great sentiment to leave on. Thanks very much, Linley.
Thank you, Sal.